Alright, it's freezing out. It snowed, if you could tell, of course. But this like snack stand slash, I don't know, where people do the play-by-play is protecting me from the wind. Alright, before my hands freeze, my hands were cold with my gloves on the walk here, and now they're off to handle the papers and the camera. Anyway, today's video is about growth. So a lot of people, for like the last 2 years, I guess, been asking about more finance videos. I made a few back in December 2022, haven't made any since. But one of the reasons, like, nothing's different. Like, the things that I said then and were doing then are the things I'm doing now. I've added more money to my positions, more money, more shares. Like, I make more deposits into my portfolio as the months go by. Nothing's really changed. But do have some things to say. People have been asking, so throw in some stuff. This video is going to be about growth. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to accumulate as many dollars as I can in what I call stage one. My retirement plan, it has 2 stages. Stage 1 is growth. I'm growing the money. In stage 2, my plan right now will be to put that money into positions that pay dividends, and the dividend payments will be my income. But this video is about stage 1, which is about growth. So 3 types of growth. I've been like comparing every once in a while, including the last few weeks. Let's make some room. One is very boring, but very reliable. And it's just putting your money into very solid mutual funds. So I looked at one from Vanguard, one from Schwab, and one from Fidelity. And they all either track the entire market or the S&P 500, but they're very solid. There are some dividends involved. That's not the purpose of the fund though, although some dividends do exist, but it's really just to grow. The price of the stock will increase year to year. Between now and let's say 15 years from now, the price will be much larger and your value in your position will be much larger as a result. Second is, let's make some room over here. Second is with growth stocks. Whether or not they have dividends, plenty do, although that's not really the point. You know, Apple, for instance, it has a dividend. The yield is very, very small. The dividend exists. I don't think there are many people out there buying Apple shares just because it has a dividend and no other reason. The reason you're buying Apple is because you expect the stock price to increase greatly year to year, between now and this time next year, between now and January, you know, 2035, 2045, etc. You're buying it because you think the price will go up. That the fact that it has a dividend is a very small but nice bonus. And there are a bunch of positions like that. You know, Apple, Microsoft, MasterCard, they're growth stocks that happen to pay a pretty small dividend. The third position, the third route that I was thinking about taking, which is the one that I take, is a combination of solid growth and solid dividend payments, and always using those dividend payments to buy more shares. So that would be like Home Depot, AbbVie, Goldman Sachs isn't awful. The yield is a little low on Goldman Sachs. Johnson & Johnson, ones like that. The growth is solid. The dividend yield right now is solid. And those companies increase their dividend payments solidly also. There are some positions like Verizon, for instance, that pretty much increase the dividend payment like a penny per quarter, the absolute minimum, just to say they've continued their streak of having an increasing dividend. But those companies I mentioned, the Johnson & Johnson, the Home Depot, the ones like that are actually looking to pay solid increases on their dividends, and they also are reliable. They have the free cash flow in order to do it. They're not overextending themselves and paying the dividend payments to their shareholders with debt. They actually have the money to pull it off. So those 3 options. First one, need to go to some graphics now. First one, let's look at the mutual fund option. Okay, follow along with me. This calculator I built, here we go. Let's first, just to show it, look at the first 2 years and the column headings. So just in this orange box. And here we go. First thing, first time in this projection, in this, example, when I buy a stock, pretend the stock is $50. And in all these examples, I'm pretending I'm just putting all my money in one position. Pretend it's $50. Starting with $80,000, that gets me 1,600 shares. Okay, so just want to show you those column headings, and now I'm going to show you that all three ways my position increases is built into this calculator. First way is that the stock price increases throughout the year. So it started at $50, now it's $55.50, and that is an 11% increase. That is one of the variables I can control in the calculator. There are three variables there on the top right. This is an 11% increase from $50 to $55.50. Second way that my position increases, now instead of the stock price, looking at the quantity of shares, the dividend money. Receiving $960 in dividends, using all that money to buy more shares. And why $960? Where did that come from? That's another variable, the yield of the dividend. So 1.2% multiplied by the $80,000, $960 in dividend payments, using all that money to buy more shares, so the quantity of shares increases. And third thing is what I call external money, or this category is abbreviated additional investment. The year's over. I've done income generating activities, I've paid all my bills, and I have this much money left over. In this example, $4,000, and I deposit it into my portfolio and use that $4,000 to buy more shares. So that's the third way that my position increases in value. And now if we look at year two, the stock price is where it ended in year one, $55.50. So you see that. And also the quantity of shares. It was 1,600. Now in this example, it's 1,689 and change, because I used all the dividend money to buy more shares. And I also used my external deposit of $4,000 to buy more shares. All right, I was a little out of order there. Wanted to show you how the calculator I built in my spreadsheet shows those three facets of my positions growing. Now that I've shown you that they're all there in the calculator, now let's go to the specific example of the mutual funds. Okay, so before I show the specifics of the mutual fund example, first I want to point out these variables on the top right. So the first is the stock movement, how the price moves year to year. You buy a stock right now, it's $100, and a year from today, it's $110. Well, it increased 10%. That's how the price moves. Another variable is the dividend yield. So it's the percent. What percent of the stock price is the dividend payment? So if you have a position that's paying $5 in dividends throughout the year, and right now the stock price is $100, $5 divided by 100, 5%. Your yield would be 5%. And last thing, how the dividend amount is increasing. So if that same hypothetical company is paying $5 per year per share for the dividend, and next year it increases to $5.50, that's a 10% increase in the dividend amount. So those three variables affect everything else going on this page. Now let's look at the specific example of this mutual plan, this mutual fund option. I looked at a Vanguard, a Schwab, and a Fidelity mutual fund, all very boring, all very safe, all very reliable. I looked at the past 10 years for each. All of them had an average annual increase over the past decade, very close to 11%. I think one was like 10.9, one was 10.7, and one was 11. So that means you go back a decade, look at the price of that mutual fund, and then add 11%, add 11%, add 11%. Do that 10 times, and you would get to the stock price today. So it's been increasing about 11% per year. Then I looked at the yield. Dividends exist in these positions, but they're not like the main reason you put your money in these positions. So the yield is small, although it's non-zero. It was about 1.2%. And I looked at one for the past 5 years. It looked like the dividend amount was increasing about 4%, which is okay. Again, not the reason to put your money in these positions, but that dividend information is there. Now I'm going to compare all three options by looking at row or year 16. This row in the orange box, after 15 years of this plan is done, what is my money looking like? The first thing to look at, that's how much I'm receiving in dividends. So if I got to 15 years done in this plan and I thought, well, I could just do nothing and just cash out my dividend money and start using it as income, well, in this plan, I only have $3,000. It's not a big part of what's going on here. But what's the value of the entire position? In this mutual fund plan with these variables, it would be about $691,000. So you could take that money, do something else with it, and hopefully make more passive income than just $3,000. But you have $691,000 to work with. Okay, so there are a lot of numbers in there, a lot of variables. But with all those variables in that specific projection, that mutual fund path gets me to about $691,000 after 15 years of this plan. Now, let's look at the growth stock route. Okay, same calculator, different variables. Now looking at some growth stocks. Top right, these three variables have changed a little. So the stock movement, I looked at, it's your companies that really growth is the reason you buy the position, although dividends do exist. Apple, Microsoft, MasterCard, Visa, companies like that. So same thing. I looked at a few of this type, and I looked at the past 10 years, and they were having stock prices of about 11.25% each year. So I put that in year to year, the stock price increasing 11.25%. Dividends do exist, but they're tiny. Just the stock price has like skyrocketed so much that the dividend as a percent is very small. So the dividend is about 2/3 of 1%. And that's what I put in for that variable. Although these companies do have the cash flow to increase the dividend amount year to year. So it was a pretty big increase, and I put in 16.8, which means if one company is paying about $5 per share this year, next year it increases to about $5.84, which is a large increase, although still not the reason you're buying the position. But that variable is in there, so let's compare it with the same row, year 16, which means 15 years are done in this plan, and it's the start of year 16. Looking forward, what's going on here? Dividends that you will receive in year 16, over $10,000, more than the mutual fund option, but still not enough to just like keep your positions and just start cashing out your dividend payments and pay all your bills for the year on 10 grand. I mean, can't do that now, and imagine in 15 years where $10,000 will get you, not nearly as far. But the value of your positions, $729,000. In this plan, with these variables, after 15 years, you'll have $729,000, and you can do something else with that money and maybe retire with that. All right, the growth stock route got me to about $729,000. That's more than the mutual fund planned. A little bit because of the stock price increasing slightly more, but mostly because the dividend increases were large. Even though the yield was low, the dividend increases year to year in absolute terms were large. Last one, let's look at the, I guess it's called like the dividend position, what I'm doing, which is solid across the board. All three facets, solid. Okay, and last option, what I call the dividend plan. Everything is solid. All these three variables are solid. So stock movement, put about 10.9%. I looked at companies like Home Depot, Hershey, AbbVie, companies that are just solid across the board in these three variables. The stock prices of those have been moving. Looked back 10 years, just like the others, put in 10.9%. And you also get in with a good dividend yield. It's not tiny like in the growth stocks. It's not small like in the mutual funds. You could get in. You can find a lot of companies for around 3%. Tougher to find higher than that unless it's an oil and gas or a real estate investment trust. But reliably, you could get in at 3% in a lot of these companies. And they have the cash flow to pay the dividend and also to increase the dividend amount year to year. So put in 12.8 in that variable. Now let's compare it like the others. Year 16, after 15 years are done, you have $37,000 just in dividend payments. So one option is to just do nothing, don't change your positions, and instead of using that $37,000 to buy more shares, you just cash it out and live off of it. I can do that today. Probably won't be able to live off of 37 grand in 15 years, but if I were retiring today in this projection, that would be one option. But the point of this is to show growth. The point of this video is growing money, stage one of my two-stage retirement plan, growth, and you have about $925,000 to work with. That's the value of your position with these variables. in 15 years. And this is the highest of the three options. So the dividend plan, the one I'm doing with solid yields, solid dividend amount increases, and solid growth on the price of the positions, that gets me to about $925,000 in that projection. So all three of those calculations had the same, starting money, had the same external money going in every year. The three differences were the stock price increasing year to year, the yield, the starting yield of the plan, and how the dividend amount is increasing year to year. That's what makes those options different. Those were the only differences. Everything else was the same. So as you can see, the one I'm doing, if things, stay how they're going. I mean, I know companies cut dividends. Some companies have totally erased dividends. Sometimes just because something the company is doing that isn't great. Sometimes because of, a war, an economic crash, a pandemic. But I didn't pick these positions at random. The positions I have put a lot of thought into them, and I'm confident that they'll continue to be strong in growth and strong in the dividend aspect, as long as dividends are things, as long as dividends are like popular things. I'm aware it could become outdated. As it is, there are like way fewer companies that pay dividends today as opposed to 30 years ago. Aware that I might need to adapt, and I'm somewhat ready for dividends to just totally stop being a thing across the board. But for now, they are, and I think these positions definitely now, definitely in 5 years, definitely in 10 years, will continue to be dividend-paying positions. The one thing I didn't mention though, because what I call like stage 1 and stage 2 in my plan, you need to be concerned if you're going to do something like this, that moving all your money from positions in stage 1 to a different position in stage 2 is going to come with a tax bill. Because if you buy shares of Home Depot today and you still have those shares 15 years from now, well, you're not paying any taxes on the growth of the stock price between now and 15 years. Because when you don't sell, your gains are not realized. You're only paying taxes on the dividend payments for the next 15 years. Well, if you sell your position in 15 years, now you've realized those gains, and there's a tax bill associated with those gains. So tomorrow's video is going to be on the transfer from what I call stage 1 to stage 2, and being aware of what might be a very large, albeit one-time tax bill. And remember, rice is a spoon food.